I think we should probably just give another minute or two. And people are still kind of coming in, and we'll start in just a minute. Thank you. All right, so good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining us for our third and final public meeting for our Priority Pathway Plan. My name is Mike Cipriano. I'm serving as the project manager from the CROG side for the study itself. As a quick refresher, the goal of the project itself has been to develop a regional network where people of all ages and abilities can walk, bike, and travel safely and comfortably throughout the region. Um, Very excited to kind of show you what the priority network is, what that's come out of our study. Um, as we wrap up, I just want to take a quick moment to thank some people who've kind of helped us throughout the last year and a half. So big thanks to Matt Hart and Caitlin Palmer for their guidance and support, throughout the study. Also, big shout out to Heidi and Annika on here. Um, you know, Everything from day to day support, and uh, they deserve a great deal of credit for the success of this project. So thank you guys, really appreciate it. Also like to thank Sean and Quinn and their team for kind of keeping us on schedule and helping us deliver what we believe is a really strong final product. Um, in addition, thank you to everyone on our advisory committee. I see some people on here right now, as well as the DOT tech team for their feedback, expertise, and direction throughout the study. Lastly, just like to thank members of the public who shared their comments and ideas, feedback since we began back in the fall of 2024. Your participation has been incredibly valuable. And as Sean will mention throughout the project, throughout the presentation, how it kind of help us shape the plan itself. Um, Before I turn it over to Shauna, just real quick format for tonight. We're going to begin with a presentation, then we'll kind of move to a Q&A session after. So if you do have any questions, either put those in the chat or hold on to them until the end, and we'll make sure we address those before we wrap up for the evening. So thank you again for coming. Shauna, so you guys.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Mike. Hello, good evening. I'm Shauna Kitzman. I'm a transportation planner with tool design in our Hartford office, and I am joined by my colleague Quinn Malloy. Quinn, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Shauna. I'm Quinn Malloy, transportation planner, also in the Hartford office under Shauna, previously of econ, do a lot of analysis.
Thanks, Quinn. We are representing the tool design team, and I want to also mention that another firm was on our team, Foursquare ITP. They're not here tonight, but we want to recognize their contributions to this process. So tonight's presentation is really organized around the arc of this project. Tonight, we're going to talk about what the project overview is, what we heard along the way, what the data confirmed, and then we'll also hear more from Quinn about what the priority network looks like, what the implementation strategy is, and we'll talk about next steps, and we'll open the floor for questions towards the end. We started this process in October of 2024 and are wrapping up this 21-month project by the end of June. So we are winding it down, and we're excited to talk to you tonight now that we have the draft final plan live. Next slide, please. As Mike already mentioned, this Zoom meeting is being recorded. Please stay on mute. We will have the chat function is open for questions, and our CROG team members will be managing that. And then we'll also be addressing questions more holistically at the end. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of the project overview, we're going to go over a refresher of what the purpose of priority pathways is. I want to also mention we're having this third and final public meeting because the draft final plan and network are available on CROG's website. And we're excited to meet up with you again. The last time we got in front of the public was in December. And as of last Friday, we're now in the public comment period. So if you put comments in the chat, or we have comments and questions at the end, those will be documented as part of the comment period and officially logged. It looks like Heidi also did put a link to the project website with the draft plan. Next slide. Okay. So throughout our region, trails exist, and many of us are familiar with some of the major trails, like the East Coast Greenway, which is shown on this map in the thickest navy blue line. You also might be familiar with the Farmington River Rail Trail or Hop River Trail or Airline Trail. A lot of these assets really help define our region and are amazing in terms of walking and biking for people of all ages and abilities. And as well, many communities have made meaningful investments in walking and biking infrastructure. That could be on-street facilities, it could be side paths, it could be trails. But a common challenge is that local improvements often stop at town or city lines. They may stop at major roadways or arterials, or perhaps where highway entrances and exits intersect with local roadways. Or they might stop or get choked at topographic challenges. And all of these can contribute to gaps in the network, which make having a network a little bit challenging. It makes it hard to use a network fully to get to your daily destinations. So the Priority Pathways really does create a regional framework so that investments can work together. And I will go on to the next slide. So what does the Priority Pathway plan prioritize? Okay, that is a tongue twister. This plan really does bring together existing assets into the regional framework that I mentioned. It identifies where the network is incomplete, it highlights where safety barriers exist, and it helps prioritize future investments. It also supports coordination and funding over time. In terms of the bullets on this slide, we really did address closing those critical gaps that I mentioned, making sure that we are striving for a low stress infrastructure. So think of a separated trail as opposed to like riding your bike on the street or walking on the shoulder of a street. Low stress infrastructure would be the separated trail there. We also want to make sure that this network is connecting people to their daily destinations, whether that be school, places of work, recreation, medical appointments, shopping, any place that all types of people need to get to every single day. And often in this region, we'll choose a car if they have that choice. We also wanted to support implementation and funding, and the plan includes next steps in those regards. Next slide, please. So the plan also equips communities throughout CROG, and there are 38 member communities, with a prioritized list that is backed by data and stakeholder input. So we looked deep into analysis across the region, which Quinn will get into in a couple minutes here. And I will talk a bit about how we did our engagement and how we merged all that feedback to come up with our plan and the network itself. The plan also directs investment into populations who have the greatest need. So that might be older folks, younger children or teenagers who are not yet able to drive and to depend on others for a lot of their mobility needs. It also addresses folks who might have a disability or those who do not have enough money to have a car, or they opt to have a car-free or car-light lifestyle. Next slide. Okay. So the project goals included meeting level of traffic stress 1 across the network so that priority pathways are safe, comfortable, and welcoming to all. So think about perhaps your 8-year-old son and your 80-year-old grandmother. We want to make sure everyone within that age range are able to use a network, not just the most intrepid bicyclists or pedestrians. Thank you. We want to make sure that this project serves daily transportation needs as well as recreational trips by connecting to those critical destinations. Next one. Another goal is to build on previous regional and local planning efforts. We did a deep dive into the regions and municipal plans, policies, and programs that contribute to this work, and we wanted to build upon a lot of the progress that's already been made. And last but not least, we want to serve all CROG communities by connecting to local bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. So if you think about the whole region, is the largest council of government in Connecticut, and we serve the capital city of Hartford, as well as your smaller communities like Granby and Bolton and Andover. So we need to make sure that this plan serves all of those communities. Next slide, please. So what did we hear? You can go again. So in terms of engagement, the process really did combine technical analysis with the lived experiences of people throughout our region. And our final report notes that engagement included an 18-member advisory committee. That committee was comprised of state agency representatives, so folks from CONDOT and DEEP, as well as local engineers, planners, walking and bicycling advocates, as well as several people who work in disability rights and public health. We also conducted 10 municipal focus groups, and we did that virtually, clustering municipalities that were near each other so that they could have the benefit of hearing from each other. And we had very rich dialogues that yielded a lot of really great input during those. We also conducted community pop-ups, so hosting events or having a table either along trails during peak summer season or at community festivals, as well as some cultural events. We conducted several walk audits, which are outlined very specifically in the draft plan itself. This is our third and final public meeting, and we've also had several committee presentations with CROG's Transportation Committee. Last but not least, we were able to work with CONDOT to gather their active transportation survey, which they conducted over the course of this study. And we figured we're not going to reinvent the wheel. CONDOT has already done a lot of great work in terms of getting public feedback. We extracted their data to apply to the CROG region. Next slide. So across all engagement, the message was consistent. People truly want to walk and bike more, but conditions make it difficult. And often that means that people might want to go, ride their bike to a trailhead, but they don't feel safe because the facilities are not there. And so instead they might put their bike in their car, or they might not go. So people really do adapt their behavior to the infrastructure and will make choices based on what feels safe and connected. I want to also just mention that the trails are incredibly valued, especially the ones mentioned earlier, like Hop River, Airline, Trout Brook Trail in West Hartford. But, there is a need to connect them better to some of our major destinations and to make them more of a holistic network. But all in all, I would say safety, stress, and gaps in the network are the biggest barriers to either you taking more trips by walking or biking, or seeing more people out walking and biking. Okay, next slide, please. Just to reiterate, we spoke to about 400 members of the public over the course of the project, and this might not come as a surprise, but safety, especially around fast-moving traffic and difficult roadway crossings, is the most consistent concern that we heard throughout communities of all stripes and with talking to people of all ages and abilities. So I just want to mention, I'm a parent. I live and I work in the region, and I took my son and my husband on a bike ride this weekend. We had the benefit of having access to painted bike lanes, and half of the trip was on a separated trail. And I can confirm that a 9-year-old in a separated bike lane does not give me, as a parent, a lot of comfort. It is still a little hairy. We had to do some left-hand turns with the traffic, and it is really scary. So I just want to mention I feel this in my heart. Um, but a lot of the data does support that most people do want separated facilities. So think of like your side paths or just separated from auto traffic. Next slide. So through our municipal engagement, a lot of our municipal leaders included engineers, Department of Public Works professionals, planners, some law enforcement, and they noted that their local improvements that they're advancing often stop where state roads begin. And this was a common concern that we heard across conversations. Communities also emphasize the importance of balancing really ambitious long-term visions with implementable and near-term projects, and even smaller wins that can help demonstrate community support and can help communities gather data that they can use to further refine their projects. Municipalities do support the regional vision, but they're also working in very real constraints. Some of these are very small towns. They might not have a dedicated town planner who works there full time. They may not have an engineer on staff. So there's some real issues with bandwidth from a staff resourcing perspective, but also financial constraints, and sometimes just institutional and understanding how to work very closely with CONDOT to move the needle in the way that the municipalities would like. Next slide, please. So I want to mention that the public input that we gathered over the project really did improve the network that we put forward. And feedback from the public helped us refine the alignments in the network, help strengthen connections, and ensures that the network reflects real travel patterns while remaining implementable. And just to kind of wrap up what we heard, the region does not need isolated smaller projects, although small wins can help contribute to the greater whole, but really advancing the connected low stress routes that help people complete actual daily trips is going to be a game changer. This is an ambitious plan. It'll take decades to implement, but we're very excited about it, and we think it has amazing potential. And people are already walking and biking, but conditions often limit where they can go safely and how they choose to take their trips. So with that, I want to pass it over to Quinn.
Great, thanks, Shauna. Go to the next slide. So we looked at a lot of different data for this project in a lot of different ways. One thing we've touched on already that we really wanted to make sure was the core of this plan and the network is the level of traffic stress. So LTS1, sorry, my cat's being evil. LTS1 really is for all users, all ages, all abilities. So this is, Shauna and her son. And that is what the network seeks to be. So making sure that every town has some sort of way to get to every other town in the region on a low traffic stress facility is the goal. This is, as Shauna said, ambitious. This is atypical. This is something that we've shown to other regions, and they're very interested in developing something like this. This is a sort of new concept for infrastructure that really serves the needs of the region. When we're striving for LTS1, that typically would have some sort of separation. So we're looking for a separated path. But it's contextual, it's context oriented. So if you're in a more rural area, a lower traffic stress area, it could look a little bit different. maybe it would be something like a shared street where there's traffic calming and signage, and it might take different shapes throughout the region. But the idea is that you can get to any other town in the region from any town in the region on a low stress network. So LTS2 will show up likely in the interim as this is built out over, many years, decades. But for the most part, the end goal is that LTS1. Next slide. The region has really good infrastructure. It's not connected necessarily entirely yet, but in terms of the shared use paths, they're great shared use paths. Shauna mentioned a bunch of them. The East Coast Greenway nearly done. There's a plan to complete it. Very good stuff. You have the Airline Trail, Hop River Trail, again, all of these different trails connecting to one another provide kind of the spine of our network, and making sure that we're intentionally creating a network and we're building out opportunities for people to get between places. It is difficult currently to justify some of these connections when you don't have that vision. So if you're not trying to connect everyone to everywhere in some capacity, it is hard for people to understand that you do need separated segments sometimes in places that aren't typically desired. They might not be near recreational facilities, but they do sort of create this cohesive network. So we're closing in next, but there are these key pieces obviously that need to be completed. Next slide. Uh, what we see here, this is a map of active transportation risk. So it's the number of crashes and the number of trips being taken, so the exposure. You see a couple of key areas starting to turn up. We have Hartford, we have Mansfield, Manchester, and some of the surrounding suburbs of Hartford. One thing I like to think about when we're developing networks, classic quote, uh, you don't justify a bridge by the number of people swimming in the water. So even though there aren't necessarily people biking regularly in all of these different communities, that doesn't mean that there isn't a demand. That means that maybe there is an infrastructure to support safe biking and safe walking in these places. So making sure that we're keeping that in mind, that we're being a little bit ambitious in order to meet the needs of the region. And when we think about, can people get to different places, it does have downstream effects where we're talking about affordability, particularly in the year 2026, when everything is very expensive, and transportation is more expensive than it's ever been for a household. So giving people different options to get places and making sure that's built into the way that your community functions is critically important to meet a lot of our goals. And that's affordability, some of our environmental goals, equity goals, safety goals, and making sure that, people do have the ability to get around their community from any age to any age. So that is sort of the crux of what we were trying to do here. Next slide. So this is what it looked like. The network, how did we make it? We asked a lot of people what they wanted, and they drew it. There were some, baseline drawing goals for how the network was originally compiled, where things would be prioritized. But really what people had to say was that they want to go places, they want to walk there, they want to bike there, but they don't like being around cars. It's hard to cross these big intersections, particularly when there's multiple state roads that interact with one another. They might be like multi-lane arterials, and that creates kind of a big area for a person to cross. And they want access to the stuff that they need. They want to be able to get to schools, into parks, into all this different stuff. Transit. I myself bike along an LTS4 road to my bus stop to put my bike on the front of a CT Transit bus. So I am both a uh, participant in this and a person who's, kind of crafting the system. But really what we want to make sure is that I'm not the only one who feels comfortable doing this. I'm going to bike on LTS for roads, but we want to make sure that Miles, Shauna's son, is able to get out there and bike this himself. So this is what people want. People love these sort of separated facilities. And they're good for local economies. They get people out, moving around, and we've seen that property values around shared use trails and paths do go up. So what does the network do here? It closes those initial gaps in the network. What's up with my okay? Closes the initial gaps in the network. So where we already have really good facilities, it makes sure that those are prioritized. It looks for low stress regional connections, and then it refined the network based on local knowledge. So really what we're hoping to do is uh, kill a couple birds with one stone. What's the phrase that you use? Not kill two birds with one stone, Shauna?
Feed two birds with one scone.
Yeah, that's better.
More nature friendly.
Yeah, we're trying to kill some, or I mean, feed some birds with a scone. As Shauna said. But we can do that, right? So it's not that we're just investing in safety or access or recreation or any of these things. It's that, all of these things can be achieved or mitigated through the development of these trails and paths. Next slide. Here it is. Here it is again. So there's a couple of different things to look at here. One is the regional pathways. These are the key corridors, the spine of the network. A lot of these are existing trails or the East Coast Greenway. You can see it is this sort of bold dashed line in the middle. Um, this regional pathways, a lot of them already exist. A lot of them are pretty straightforward, but really what we wanted to do is create a concentric hub and spoke model around Hartford. That's conceptually what it was. People can get into Hartford and then they can get around to the towns near them. In sort of circles radiating from the center. So not just going into Hartford like the highways operate currently, but making sure that we have network connectivity, super critical to make sure that people can get around. Then there are community connections. These are maybe community places that are relevant, or they connect the interior of the community to these spine nodes, these spine networks. And then there are local circulators, and these might be less critical segments that connect to something like a school or some other community destination, a neighborhood that was identified as being important. But all of these are critical infrastructure, but really making sure that we're able to see the vision of the one cohesive network that people can use to get around. Next slide. What does it connect? A couple of different things we looked at. So downtown centers, town centers, and main streets. So making sure that we're, stores center, definitely connected. Places like that where there's a lot of different of activity happening. Transit, particularly intercity transit. So making sure that if there is a connection point that people might take between cities, that they're able to get to those. So if there's a bus stop in a park and ride that might have been included in the network to make sure that people are able to be truly multimodal there. Um, and then parks, trails, and recreations, the sort of core of how people use trails today in Connecticut is for all sorts of stuff. People use it to get to work and to do errands, but making sure that recreation still plays a part here. A lot of people are recreating. So all of this was considered. Next slide. And these are our top priorities. So looking at how it all sort of ended up, there's really kind of four major pieces here that we want to touch on. The first is completing those critical gaps, finishing one project before you start another, making sure that the East Coast Greenway is complete to the best of our abilities right at the start of this. So finishing one project, and then there are gaps in some of the other trails too. So like the Farmington Canal has some gaps going into Hartford from the Charter Oak Greenway, so making sure that where there already is really good infrastructure, people are able to complete getting to their destination and that they're not, having to go off the trail if it's a trail or a path onto a lower or a higher stress facility. Then we want to make sure that we are strengthening the low stress pathways in the suburbs. So making sure that around Hartford, we have uh, places that we can get to. It's not just going into the city center, but making sure that different communities are connected to each other, making sure that Stores is connected to other regional cities, making sure that New Britain and Manchester are also connected to regional cities so that it's a network. We want to avoid really going into one point. Hartford is also critically important to have separated LTS1 infrastructure in. It is limited currently. There are some great facilities in Hartford, Constitution Plaza, beautiful. But we want to make sure that that spreads out, that we have that and that everyone has access to low stress LTS1 separated, comfortable infrastructure in Hartford. Critically important for this. And then the last one here is making sure that we are serving these different points of interest so that we go to town centers, we go to transit hubs, public parks, and that all of this is accessible on foot and by bike. And those are kind of the priorities. I wouldn't necessarily say that they're, ranked in any order, but they're all critically important for this to be finalized. Next slide. What could these improvements look like? All sorts of different paths, I think, here, trails, bike lanes, different stuff. In the plan, you'll be able to see in more detail how we kind of laid this out, but there are good examples in the CROG region, particularly in some of these separated paths, side paths, shared use paths, but also in bike lanes where they're appropriate, um, and shared streets where they're appropriate. I do think that there's a high potential for a lot of these shared streets in rural areas where you could add some traffic calming and create a sort of neighborhood greenway, they're sometimes called. But making sure that we have those facilities, we have the right facilities in different places. We have safe crossings. That one is kind of a difficult one. I know that there's work in the region currently to improve a lot of crossings. And then traffic calming. Sometimes we can't create fully separated facilities, but if we're able to slow traffic to speed, that is safe for everyone to share the space, that can sometimes be enough. So lots of different ways to do this, no one way to do it, but the end goal of having a connected network of places where people can bike and walk safely is the outcome, hopefully. Next slide. The implementation strategy. Next slide. This is going to take a long time, but hopefully, this, you know, coordination between CROG and CONDOT and the people who've been involved in this plan, municipalities, will help us move this forward pretty quickly. I think that a lot of these pieces, once they've been envisioned, can come together, especially when they start to get incorporated into different um, planning projects as people develop new areas. So making sure that these are aligned with different funding priorities, making sure that we start to move forward on design processes, um, and then aligning funding. I do think that when it comes to design, this is mostly a conceptual network. Obviously, a lot of these places, it'd be great if the network looked exactly like we've drawn it. It's unrealistic, especially as we start to get into things like design and funding. So over periods of time, priorities might shift, and these are likely not going to be the exact facilities that you see. New partnerships might be developed. Someone might donate a tract of land. There's many different ways that this could play out. But the first step here is making sure that we are identifying a need, making sure that there's community support for it, which there is, and then starting to think about how that fits into our other projects. Next slide. We have some near-term actions that we can do too. So really starting to close those gaps, particularly in the East Coast Greenway, and some of these other major trail and path facilities. Improving crossings, that's a huge one, making sure that we're using some of the tools that are at our disposal to do that. And testing quick builds. Quick builds, sometimes they're like demonstration projects where you might be just doing like a day project where you test out a new type of facility. But that the ideal for a demonstration project is that it becomes an interim semi-permanent design. And then when you go in for reconstruction of that road, you can redesign it to incorporate the interim design as permanent infrastructure. So tactical urbanism, especially on roads that are owned locally, I think is a great way to get started on this right away. Towns have a lot of control over local roads, and they might be able to test some of these concepts out. And really what we want to do is make sure that we're able to match some of these different projects and segments and routes to funding opportunities within the state and nationally. So making sure that this does have an actual safety impact is a huge way to do that. Next slide. I will pass it over to Shauna. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Quinn. Next slide, please. Okay, so in addition to Heidi dropping the link to the draft final plan, which is on the Priority Pathways webpage on the CROG website. Oh, I also wanted to mention, I saw a question come in from Kevin that is there an interactive map available? There will be by the end of this week on that same web page, and it's not designed to be a mechanism to collect feedback. We have already done that with a couple different audiences, which really did help inform the map as you see it today. However, you will be able to zoom in and out and pan around and just kind of get in and like see the nitty gritty of the network itself, and then you can share your feedback on with the mechanism, which is sending an email to Mike Cipriano, and his email is listed on that same webpage. We are currently in the 30-day public comment period. That will run through Sunday, June 14th. And we look forward to receiving feedback. I will also say it was brought to my attention today that CONDOT released one of their like a trail or pathway network as part of their active transportation effort. And so we are also coordinating with CONDOT to make sure that these two networks are talking to each other because they should, and we want them to. Next slide. So after we collect and synthesize all feedback, our team will take a look at it holistically and determine how it changes the plan and or the network itself. We'll be wrapping up this project by the end of June. And then we encourage you and your constituents or your neighbors and family and friends to follow along for CROG for updates. They are the owners of this project. And then within your own municipalities to support local implementation conversations related to bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, safer crossings, pilot programs that test out new geometry in your roadways and slow down traffic. All of those will contribute to the gradual build out of the Priority Pathways network. Okay. And after we finish up this project, I mean, the focus is going to shift to coordination, and CROG can perhaps speak to anything that's kind of coming down the pipeline on their end. But we will be wrapping up by the end of June. So with that, I'd like to open the floor to questions or comments.
See a comment in the chat, Mike, if you want to decide who takes that.
No, it's a great question. I think that's something that, as an organization, we're trying to figure out the best course of action too. It really does depend on, the town. Every town is different in their priorities. Um, Sometimes we just need to get creative once we kind of get to kind of figuring out which corridor to kind of go through. Um, I don't know if I have a great answer for that. I know, towns such as West Hartford and Manchester have kind of dealt with some of this stuff in the past. Um, it's definitely something that we're aware of and trying to kind of work through. I don't know if there's a great answer for that just yet, Ed.
I can add a little to that, Mike, if you don't mind. I do
Yeah, go
think
ahead.
that it's completely context sensitive, right? We want to make sure that we're thinking about the needs of the community. We're not going to drop facilities down on a place that maybe it doesn't fit for them. So making sure that that is a process, a community oriented process for how this is shaped is definitely interesting. I think there's a lot of new infrastructure types that people might be interested in looking at that can both enable downtown spaces to have vital and vibrant business activity and economic activity and active transportation. Some of them, I just recently was looking at a beautiful, what's called a side path. It's a pedestrian and bicycle facility on one side of the road that goes through sometimes the downtown area. Beautiful side path, by Slater Mill in Pawtucket. Might want to check that out. Great opportunity. There's still parking available, beautiful landscaping, but stuff like that can be done. You can have creative design types. You don't need to, throw down any facility that doesn't make sense for your town. So making sure that this is a working process for what we call context sensitive solutions, stuff that works for you and your place, is definitely how this will shake out in the future. Also, check out that side path in Slater Mill. It looks great. Just saw it on Street View.
I I will just finish up by saying, Ed, I'm not sure if you're talking about in like the commercial, like downtown commercial areas or residential neighborhoods, but I know at least in West Hartford, and I know in other towns as well, the parking does exist. It might not be like right in front of a shop, or it might not be right in front of a restaurant or a bar, but like the parking spots do exist and are very, you could get there by walking and it's not a very long trek. But I think a lot of the message around parking and shifts to people's behavior when it comes to parking is about messaging and helping to convey what the parking options are. I know people do get upset when they can't just like park in front of their, dry cleaner and like pop in and run out. But there's often a surplus of parking nearby that might just be, you know, behind the building or in the parking garage nearby. So I'll just mention that as well. Um, the plan itself doesn't go too deep into parking, but agree with Quinn. It's all context sensitive, and the routes that we recommend are not set in stone. They are the best from what the data that we had available are. But if the town or the DOT have a project on a nearby street that helps contribute to that regional connectivity, that is completely acceptable too.
Hi, could I just jump in with a question?
Sure.
I apologize if you covered this at the beginning. I was a little late. When you did outreach to the towns, what was your sense of the level of buy-in? Were people like excited, let's do this, or was it more like tacit approval?
I generally felt like there was a good amount of buy-in and excitement for a regional connected pathway. I definitely did pick up on the kind of shared sentiment of like we work with constrained budgets. We only have a few people on staff, especially for some smaller communities. Um, and like how do we work in lockstep with DOT to advance common goals? I would say
Uh,
those were the main like concerns in implementing the plan.
From the public, almost no negative feedback. I personally was out at a lot of these feedback events and overwhelming enthusiasm. Obviously, some people don't like bike lanes, but people, for the most part, talked about how they love to go to the path. They wish that they could get to the path from their house. They go out with their kids. Their kids can't, get there by themselves. So from a public perspective, I'll say that Shauna's absolutely right from a lot of the municipal staff that we talk to, but talking to members of the public, I've also been to a lot of engagement in Connecticut in general, and people want to walk around.
I'm looking at a comment from Barbara in here talking about maintenance funding. So we have a lot of good funding options for municipalities in the plan itself. But is there anything for maintenance? Um, I would say for maintenance itself is if there's like so generally like DOT, just the like a rails to trails, for example, DOT will, possibly build something, and then it's up to the town. It's the town's responsibility to more or less maintain that unless there, is a significant maintenance issue, larger scale that the town may not be able to um, kind of afford or, really just kind of create. So if a tree falls across something, if there's like snow plowing, that's really going to be up to the town. I don't know if there is any funding programs for maintenance itself. That's something we can certainly look into. Um, I don't know if anybody has anything to add on to that or not, but I think it's generally speaking up to the town for maintenance itself.
I will add, and I don't, this is not an official policy that is like baked into the plan, but one thing that did come up in some of our advisory committee meetings, was that there might be potential for an organization such as CROG to look into shared services for municipalities. So this is something that they provide, for other maybe administrative tasks, or Mike, you probably know more, maybe like, I don't know, operational support to some smaller towns. But we did suggest there might be opportunity for like clusters of smaller towns if they had facilities to maintain, like it perhaps could work with CROG to identify like a contractor to help provide them.
Yeah, and Aaron just put in, thank you, Aaron, the Rec Shows grant, I guess does fund maintenance for some trail facilities.
Are there any other questions or comments? Thank you all so far for your good questions. Okay,
But yeah, well, I was just gonna give a plug to Paul and his the DOT active transportation plan.
yeah.
I was able to attend some of their open house earlier today. So really interesting stuff, and they're gonna have their other one, as Annika put in the chat, tomorrow night, I believe at 6 o'clock, and I believe it's on Zoom. Um, so if you're able to, feel free to attend. They have some really good things on there.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Hearing no further questions or comments, I will just say, please go forward, read the draft final plan, just poke around the appendices if you really want to get into it. And by the end of this week, there'll be an interactive map where you can pan around and just take a closer look, and then send your feedback to Mike, and Mike will filter it to our team, and we will compile everything and be looking at all those comments at the end of the comment period on June 14th. That's it. I think here's where we part ways, and we really appreciate your involvement and interest in this project. It's super exciting.
I think technically I need to keep the meeting open till 7:30.
Okay, we can
So
hang out.
we can stop the recording and then we can just hang out for 10 minutes if anyone has any other questions.